size of me. Alright, dudes. Now is the time. We're gonna read a live reading. We're gonna read live a reading of chapters 7 through 9 of Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. Can I get a quick roll call from everyone, just so everyone knows who is who?
No, apparently.
Don't all jump at once.
Okay, I'm Toga's little lie, and I'm playing Dr. Constantine.
Nice.
I'm hard, man.
I am Prism. I am doing Ohlsson and the princess.
I'm Corteth, doing Monsieur Bouc and Antonio Foscarelli.
Where the fuck is Franbolt?
That's a good question.
That's right, the wide one.
I can do Poirot if need be.
I'm the Wackerly. I am doing Colonel Arbuthnot, Edward Henry Masterman, and Pierre Michel.
Pierre Michel. And I, of course, am Strix Arcana. I'm the narrator, Mary Debenham, and Mrs. Hubbard, and maybe also Poirot. Or Corteth, or whomever wants to take Poirot.
I can be
time.
Poirot because I only have one.
Okay, if you're down, then
If
I'm
he's not
down.
here.
If you're
Yeah,
down,
yeah, I
clown.
can do that.
All right.
I'm down to clown.
Well,
We'll just all read Poirot's lines in unison.
oh, dude, we should. It is I, the Poirot Collective. Okay, well, let's just begin. If Franbolt arrives, he can just hop in. No problem. No issue. It's fine. It's fine. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Let us begin.
We are fine.
Yeah, we're fine. Alright, dudes. Chapter 7. The Identity of Mary Debenham. She wore no hat. Her head was thrown back as though in defiance. The sweep of her hair back from her face, the curve of her nostril, suggested the figurehead of a ship plunging gallantly into a rough sea. In that moment, she was beautiful. Her eyes went to Arbuthnot for a minute. Just a minute. She said to Poirot,
That's you, Mary Debenham.
"You wish to see me?" Poirot. Who's Poirot? Who wants to be Poirot?
Lie, you're picking that up? Or do you want me to do it?
Whomever. A male voice could take it.
I wish to ask you, mademoiselle, why you lied to us this morning.
Lied to you? I don't know what you mean.
You concealed the fact that at the time of the Armstrong tragedy, you were actually living in the house. You told me that you had never been to America.
He saw her flinch for a moment, then recover herself. Yes, she said. That is true.
No, mademoiselle. It was false.
You misunderstood me. I mean that it is true that I lied to you.
Ah, you admit it?
Her lips curved into a smile. Certainly, since you have found me out.
You are at least frank, mademoiselle.
There does not seem anything else for me to be.
Well, of course. That is true. And now, mademoiselle, may I ask you for the reason for these evasions?
I should have thought the reason leapt to the eye, Monsieur Poirot.
It does not leap to mine, mademoiselle.
She said in a quiet, even voice with a trace of hardness in it. I have my living to get.
You mean...
She raised her eyes and looked him full in the face. How much do you know, Monsieur Poirot, of the fight to get and keep decent employment? Do you think that a girl who had been detained in connection with a murder case, whose name and perhaps photographs were reproduced in the English papers, do you think that any nice, ordinary, middle-class Englishwoman would want to engage that girl as governess to her daughters?
I do not see why not, if no blame attached to you.
Oh, blame. It is not blame, it is publicity. So far, Monsieur Poirot, I have succeeded in life. I have had a well-paid, pleasant post. I was not going to risk the position I had attained when no good end could have been served.
I will venture to suggest, mademoiselle, that I would have been the best judge of that, not you.
She shrugged her shoulders.
For instance, you could have helped me in the matter of identification.
What do you mean?
Is it possible, mademoiselle, that you did not recognize the Countess Andrani, Mrs. Armstrong's younger sister, whom you taught in New York?
Countess Andrani? No. She shook her head. It may seem extraordinary to you, but I did not recognize her. She was not grown up, you see, when I knew her. That was over 3 years ago. It is true that the Countess reminded me of someone. It puzzled me. But she looked so foreign. I never connected her with the little American schoolgirl. It is true that I only glanced at her casually when coming into the restaurant car. I noticed her clothes more than her face. She smiled faintly. Women do. And then, well, I had my own preoccupations.
You will not tell me your secret, mademoiselle?
Poirot's voice was very gentle and persuasive. She said in a low voice, I can't. And suddenly, without warning, she broke down, dropping her face upon her outstretched arms and crying as though her heart would break. The colonel sprang up and stood awkwardly beside her.
Hey, look here!
He stopped and, turning round, scowled fiercely at Poirot.
I'll break every bone in your damned body, you dirty little whippersnapper!
He said.
Monsieur,
Protested Monsieur Bouc. Arbuthnot had
Mary!
Huh? Arbuthnot had turned back to the girl.
Mary! For God's sake!
She sprang up. It's nothing, I'm all right. You don't need me anymore, do you, Monsieur Poirot? If you do, you must come and find me. Oh, what an idiot. What an idiot I'm making of myself. She hurried out of the car. Arbuthnot, before following her, turned once more on Poirot.
Miss Debenham's got nothing to do with this business. Nothing, do you hear? And if she's worried and interfered with, you'll have me to deal with.
He strode out.
I like to see an angry Englishman.
Said Poirot.
They are very amusing. The more emotional they feel, the less command they have of language.
But Monsieur Bouc was not interested in the emotional reactions of Englishmen. He was overcome by admiration of his friend.
Mon cher, vous êtes épatant!
He cried.
Another miraculous guess.
It is incredible how you think of these things.
Said Dr. Constantine admiringly.
Oh, I claim no credit this time. It was not a guess. Countess Andrani practically told me. Comment? Surely not. Just be going back and forth to myself.
Uh-huh.
You
I can
remember.
try and since I'm back now.
Go for it, yeah.
Oh yeah. You remember, I asked her about her governess or companion. I had already decided in my mind that if Mary Debenham were mixed up in the matter, she must have figured in the household in some such capacity.
Yes, but Countess Andrani described a totally different person.
Exactly. A tall, middle-aged woman with red hair. In fact, the exact opposite in every respect of Miss Debenham, so much so as to be quite remarkable. But then she had to invent a name quickly, and there it was, the unconscious association of ideas gave her away. She said, Miss Freebody, you remember?
Yes.
Yeah, Bean, you may not know it, but there is a shop in London that was called until recently Debenham and Freebody. With the name Debenham running in her head, the Countess clutches at another name quickly, and the first that comes is Freebody. Naturally, I understood immediately.
That is yet another lie. Why did she do it?
Possibly more loyalty. It makes things a little difficult.
Ma foi!
Said Monsieur Bouc with violence.
But does everybody on this train tell lies?
And that
Said Poirot.
is what we are about to find out.
Nicely done, everyone. Nicely done. Snaps all around. And with that, my friends, let us move on to Chapter 8. Further surprising revelations.
Nothing would surprise me now.
Said Monsieur Bouc.
Nothing. Even if everybody in the train proved to have been in the Armstrong household, I should not express surprise.
Remark.
Said Poirot.
The Italian.
I think he's cutting out.
He is cutting out.
pick up for now.
Yes,
That is a very profound remark.
said Poirot.
Would you like to see what your favorite suspect, the Italian, has to say for himself? You are going to make another of these famous guesses of yours? Precisely.
It really
Constantine.
is a most extraordinary case.
No,
Said
it is most... No, it is most natural.
Monsieur Bouc flung up his arms in comic despair.
If this is what you call natural, mon ami.
Words failed him. Poirot had by this time requested the dining car attendant to fetch Antonio Foscarelli. The big Italian had a wary look in his eye as he came in. He shot nervous glances from side to side like a trapped animal.
What do you want?
He said.
I have nothing more to tell you. Nothing, do you hear? Per Dio.
He struck his hand on the table.
Yes, you have something more to tell us.
Said Poirot firmly.
The truth. The truth?
He shot an uneasy glance at Poirot. All the assurance and geniality had gone out of his manner.
Oui. It may be that I know it already, but it will be a point in your favor if it comes from you, spontaneously. You talk like the American police. Come clean. That is what they say. Come clean. Ah, so you have had experience in the New York police. No, never. It could not prove a thing against me. It was not for want of trying.
Poirot said quietly.
Want to pick up, Molly?
Yeah, where are we? I'm sorry.
I'm using a physical book.
Yeah, was it Poirot said quietly?
Yeah.
Poirot said quietly. Let me...
That was an Armstrong case, yada yada.
Page 5.
Page 5, okay.
Page 5.
I don't have page numbers, so I'm a PDF.
Oh. Okay, where were we? I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
I'm looking.
You talk like the American police. Come clean. That is what they say.
Oh,
come clean.
okay.
You have come, and then Poirot said quietly. That is.
Okay.
That was in the Armstrong case.
Okay. So you have never had experience with the New York police?
Fine.
Mhm.
No, never. It could not prove a thing against me, but it was not for want of trying.
Poirot said quietly.
That was the Armstrong case, was it not? You were the chauffeur?
His eyes met those of the Italian. The bluster went out of the big man. He was like a pricked balloon.
Since you know, why ask me?
Why did you lie this morning?
Business reasons. Besides, I do not trust the Yugoslav police. I hate the Italians. They would not have given me justice. Poirot.
Oh, perhaps this is exactly justice they would have given you.
No, I had nothing to do with this business last night. I never left my carriage. The long-faced Englishman, he can tell you so. It was not I who killed this pig, this ratchet. You cannot prove anything against me.
Poirot was writing something on a sheet of paper. He looked up and said quietly. Very good. You can go. Foscarelli lingered uneasily.
You realize that it was not I, that I could have had nothing to do with it.
I said that you could go.
It's a conspiracy. You want to frame me? All for a pig of a man who should have gone to the chair? It was an infamy that he did not. If it had been me, if I had been arrested...
But it was not you. You had nothing to do with the kidnapping of the child.
What is that you're saying? Why, that little one? She was the delight of the house. Tonio, she called me. She would sit in the car, pretend to hold the wheel. All the household worshipped her. Even the police came to understand that. The beautiful little one.
His voice had softened. The tears came into his eyes. Then he wheeled round abruptly on his heel and strode out of the dining car. Pietro, called Poirot. The dining car attendant came at a run. The number 10, the Swedish lady. Bien, monsieur.
Another?
cried Monsieur Bouc.
Ah, no, it is not possible. I tell you, it is not possible.
Mon cher, we have to know. Even if in the end everybody on the train proves to have a motive for killing Ratchet, we have to know. Once we know, we can settle once and for all where the guilt lies.
My head is spinning,
groaned Monsieur Bouc. Greta Ohlsson was ushered in sympathetically by the attendant. She was weeping bitterly. She collapsed on the seat facing Poirot and wept steadily into a large handkerchief. Now do not distress yourself, mademoiselle. Do not distress yourself. Poirot patted her on the shoulder. Just a few words of truth, that is all. You were the nurse who was in charge of little Daisy Armstrong.
It is true. It is true.
Wept the wretched woman.
She was an angel, a sweet, trustful angel. She knew nothing but kindness and love. She was taken away by that wicked man, cruelly treated, and her poor mother, and the other little one, who never lived at all. You cannot understand. You cannot know. If you had been there as I was, if you had seen the whole terrible tragedy, I ought to have told the truth about myself this morning. But I was afraid. I did so rejoice that evil man was dead, that he could kill no more or torture little children. Ah, I cannot speak. I have no words.
She swept with more vehemence than ever. Poirot continued to pat her gently on the shoulder. There, I comprehend. I comprehend everything. Everything, I tell you. I will ask you no more questions. It is enough that you admitted what I know to be truth. I understand, I tell you. By now inarticulate with sobs, Greta Ohlsson rose and groped her way blindly towards the door. As she reached it, she collided with a man coming in. It was the valet, Masterman. He came straight up to Poirot and spoke in his usual quiet, unemotional voice.
I hope I'm not intruding, sir. I thought it best to come along at once, sir, and tell you the truth. I was Colonel Armstrong's Batman in the war, sir, and afterwards I was valet in New York. I'm afraid I concealed that fact this morning. It was very wrong of me, sir, and I thought I'd better come and make a clean breast of it. But I hope, sir, that you're not suspecting Tonio in any way. Old Tonio, sir, wouldn't hurt a fly, and I can swear positively that he never left the carriage all last night. So you see, sir, he couldn't have done it. Tonio may be a foreigner, sir, but he's a very gentle creature. Not like those nasty, murdering Italians one reads about.
He stopped. Poirot looked steadily at him. Is that all you have to say?
That is all, sir.
He paused then, as Poirot did not speak. He made an apologetic little bow and after momentary hesitation left the dining car in the same quiet, unobtrusive fashion as he had come.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right. We are on
Where are we?
the line of Dr. Constantine that says, "This is more wildly improbable."
Page
Okay.
7.
Page 7, okay. This
Said Dr. Constantine.
is more wildly improbable than any Roman policiere I have ever read.
I agree.
Said Monsieur Bouc.
Of the 12 passengers in that coach, 9 have been proved to have had a connection with the Armstrong case. What next, I ask you? Or should I say, who next?
I'll keep reading Poirot.
That's fine, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I can almost give you the answer to your question, said Poirot. Here comes our American sleuth, Monsieur Hardman.
Is he too coming to confess?
Before Poirot could reply, the American had reached their table. He cocked an alert eye at them, and sitting down, he drawled out. Hardman. Oh shit, Franbolt's here.
Hey.
Oh shit, friend.
Is Hardman
Cecil?
Oh,
soft?
yeah, I'm here.
Okay, it's your turn. Just exactly.
Wait,
what's
isn't
up
there
on the
one
street.
more line?
Before Poirot could reply, the American had reached their table. He cocked an alert eye at them, and sitting down, he drawled out.
That's hard.
It's not highlighted.
Oh,
Just
I'm
exactly
sorry.
what's up on this train. It seems Bughouse to me.
Poirot twinkled at him. Are you quite sure, Mr. Hardman, that you yourself were not the gardener at the Armstrong home?
They didn't have a garden.
Replied Mr. Hardman literally. Or the butler?
Haven't got the fancy manners for a place like that. No, I never had any connection with the Armstrong house. But I'm beginning to believe I'm about the only one on this train who hadn't. Can you beat it? That's what I say. Can you beat it?
Are you
sorry,
ready,
I just
Franbolt?
found... Yeah.
Okay.
It is certainly a little surprising.
Said Poirot mildly.
I don't know how to pronounce that.
C'est rigolo.
Yeah.
C'est rigolo.
Chess? Chess Rigolo?
C'est rigolo.
Chess Rigolo.
Burst from Monsieur Bouc.
Have you any ideas about the origin of the crime, Mr. Hardman?
Inquired Poirot.
No, sir, it's got me beat. I don't know how to figure it out. They can't all be in on it. But which one is the guilty party is beyond me. How did you get wise to all this? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, just guess.
And believe me, you're a pretty slick guesser. Yes, I'll tell the world you're a slick guesser.
Mr. Hardman leaned back and looked at Poirot admiringly.
You'll excuse me,
He said.
but no one would believe it to look at you. I take off my hat to you, I do indeed.
Oh, you're too kind, Mr. Hardman.
Not at all, I've got to hand it to you.
All the same,
Said
the problem is not yet quite solved. Can we see with authority that we know who killed Monsieur Rachet?
Count me out.
Said Mr. Hardman.
I'm not saying anything at all, I'm just full of natural admiration. What about the other two you haven't had a guess at yet? The old American dame and the lady's maid? I suppose we can take it that they're not the only innocent parties. I suppose we can take it that they're the only innocent parties on the train?
Unless
Said
we can
Poirot,
fit them in.
smiling. I'm sorry, I have to read the dialogue tags.
Yeah, no, I know. It's fine, right?
Go ahead.
Unless we can fit them into a little connection as well. Shall we say housekeeper and cook in the Armstrong household?
Well, nothing in the world would surprise me now.
Said Mr. Hardman with quiet resignation.
Bughouse, that's what this business is, a bughouse.
Ah, mon cher, that would indeed be stretching coincidence a little too far.
Said Monsieur Bouc.
They cannot all be in it.
Poirot looked at him.
Oh, you do not understand.
He said.
You do not understand at all. Tell me,
He
do
said.
you know who killed Rachet?
Do you?
Countered Monsieur Bouc. Poirot nodded.
Oh, yes.
He said.
I have known for some time. It is so clear that I wonder you have not seen it also.
He looked at Hardman and asked.
And you?
The detective shook his head. He stared at Poirot curiously.
I don't know.
He said.
I don't know at all. Which of them was it?
Poirot was silent a minute, then he said.
If you will be so good, Monsieur Hartman, assemble everyone here. There are two possible solutions to this case. I want to lay them both before you all.
Once again, snaps all around, ladies and gents. Nicely done. Nicely done. Way to read with expression. Everyone is doing so well. I'm so tickled. Ugh, ridiculous. I'm also trying.
My internet is killing me.
That's okay. You've come in a couple of times, and I see it, and I acknowledge it, and I respect it. I'm trying to also. I'm like. Once again, I'd like to remind you guys that this is the first time that I've read this portion of the book, and I'm like shitting my pants right now.
I believe it.
I swear. I'm just gonna give this a quick my suspicion, and then we'll go on to the last chapter. I swear.
Yeah, make
to
a prediction.
Jesus, my two predictions are he's not interviewed Hubbard, and he's not interviewed the princess yet, or the maid. So I'm starting to suspect it's one of, well, I don't suspect Pierre. Well, you know what? I kind of do. Because everyone is in on it, I think. I still think everyone is in on it, but I feel like the puppeteer, you know, controlling all of the strings, I think knee-jerk, I almost want to say it's Hubbard. Just because she's almost too over the top. And I don't know if that's her way of covering something up, but I don't know. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Let's find out.
Do you really think the mastermind of a plan like this would be fucking Martha?
Yeah, because a woman named Martha is up to no good. Sorry to all the Marthas out there.
Superman's mom must be just planning the evilest of things.
Yeah, she has
And
a
Batman's mom?
secret kryptonite.
Yeah, and
hidden
Batman's
away.
mom.
Yeah. Secret
Anyways.
getting stabbed.
Yeah, her whole plan was getting murdered by the Joker.
Yeah, it all came together.
Just diabolical.
Mhm. Bastard. Well, let's find out who it really was. I'm flipping out right now, dude. Chapter 9. Poirot propounds 2 solutions. I just spat all over my
shit.
book.
I just realized, like, the amount of reading I'll have to do for this one.
When you took Poirot, I was like,
yeah.
alright. I can only imagine that, because I looked at the chapter names, which maybe was a little cheating, but yeah, the last one, I was like, he's probably gonna talk a lot. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's the fun part to me, though. The nice long monologues.
Yeah, agree. Because then you can imagine everyone like, oh, what's he gonna talk about? Anyway, let's begin. Yeah. Chapter 9, Poirot propounds 2 solutions. The passengers came crowding into the restaurant car and took their seats round the tables. They all bore more or less the same expression, one of expectancy, mingled with apprehension. The Swedish lady was still weeping, and Mrs. Hubbard was comforting her. "Now, you just take a hold on yourself, my dear. Everything's going to be perfectly all right. You mustn't lose your grip on yourself. If one of us is a nasty murderer, we know quite well it isn't you. Why, anyone would be crazy even to think of such a thing. You sit here and I'll stay right by you. Don't you worry any." Her voice died away as Poirot stood up. The Wackerly conductor was hovering in the doorway.
You permit that I stay, monsieur?
Certainly, Michel.
Poirot cleared his throat.
Messieurs and mesdames, I will speak in English since I think all of you know a little of that language. We are here to investigate the death of Samuel Edward Rashid, alias Cassetti. There are 2 possible solutions of the crime. I shall put them both before you and I shall ask Monsieur Bouc and Dr. Constantine here to judge which solution is the right one. Now, you all know the facts of the case. Mr. Rashid was found stabbed this morning. He was last known to be alive at 12:37 last night when he spoke to the Wackerly conductor through the door. A watch in his pajama pocket was found to be badly dented, and it had stopped at 1:15. Dr. Constantine, who examined the body when found, puts the time of death at having been between midnight and 2 in the morning. At half an hour after midnight, as you all know, the train ran into a snowdrift. After that time, it was impossible for anyone to leave the train. The evidence of Mr. Hardman, who is a member of a New York detective agency,
Several heads turned to look at Mr. Hardman.
shows that no one could have passed this compartment.
Number 16 at the extreme end. I'll just read it.
Yeah, like I imagine like there's some sort of diagram that he's gesturing towards.
Yeah.
Without being seen by him, we are therefore forced to the conclusion that the murderer is to be found among the occupants of one particular coach, the Istanbul Calais coach. That, I will say, was our theory.
Comment?
Ejaculated Monsieur Bouc, startled.
But I will put before you an alternative theory. It is very simple. Mr. Rachet had a certain enemy whom he feared. He gave Mr. Hardman a description of this enemy and told him that the attempt, if made at all, would most probably be made on the second night of Istanbul. Now we put it to you, ladies and gentlemen, that Mr. Rachet knew a good deal more than he told. The enemy, as Mr. Rachet expected, joined the train at Belgrade, or else at Vinkovci, by the door left of opened by Colonel Arbuthnot and Mr. McQueen, who had just descended to the platform. He was provided with a suit of bag and knit uniform which he wore over his ordinary clothes, and a pass key which enabled him to gain access to Mr. Ratchet's compartment in spite of the door being locked. Mr. Ratchet was under the influence of a sleeping draught. The man stabbed him with great ferocity and left the compartment through the communicating door leading to Mrs. Hubbard's compartment.
That's so, said Mrs. Hubbard, nodding her head.
He thrust the dagger he had used into Mrs. Hubbard's sponge bag in passing. Without knowing it, he also lost the button of his uniform. Then he slipped out of the compartment and along the corridor. He hastily thrust the uniform into a suitcase and empty compartment, and a few minutes later, dressed in ordinary clothes, he left the train just before it started off, using the same means of egress, the door near the dining car.
Everybody gasped.
What about that watch?
Demanded Mr. Hardman.
There you have the explanation of the whole thing. Mr. Ratchet had omitted to put his watch back at an hour as he should have done at Surrey Broad. His watch still registered Eastern European time, which is 1 hour ahead of Central European time. It was 12:15 when Mr. Ratchet was stabbed, not 1:15.
But it is absurd, that explanation.
Cried Monsieur Bouc.
What of the voice that spoke from the compartment at 23 minutes to 1? It was either the voice of Ratchet or else that of his murderer.
Not necessarily. It may have been, well, a third person. Who had gone in to speak to Ratchet and found him dead. He rang the bell to summon the conductor, then, as you expressed it, the wind rose in him. He was afraid of being accused of the crime, and he spoke pretending to be Ratchet.
It's possible.
Admitted Monsieur Bouc grudgingly. Poirot looked at Mrs. Hubbard.
Yes, madam, you were going to say?
Well, I don't quite know what I was gonna say. Do you think I forgot to put my watch back too?
No, madam. I think you had the man pass through, but unconsciously. Later you had a nightmare of a man being in your compartment and woke up with a start and rang for the conductor.
Well, I suppose that's possible, admitted Mrs. Hubbard. Princess Dragomiroff was looking at Poirot with a very direct glance.
How do you explain the evidence of my maid, monsieur?
Oh, very simply, madame. You may recognize the handkerchief I showed her as yours. She somewhat clumsily tried to shield you. She did encounter the man, but earlier, while the train was at Vinkovci station. She pretended to have seen him at a later hour with a confused idea, giving you a watertight alibi.
The princess bowed her head.
You have thought of everything, monsieur. I admire you.
There was a silence. Then everyone jumped as Dr. Constantine suddenly hit the table with a blow with his fist.
But no.
He said.
No, no, and again, no. That is an explanation that will not hold water. It is deficient in a dozen minor points. The crime was not committed so. So, M. Poirot must know that perfectly well.
Poirot turned a curious glance on him.
I see,
he said.
That I shall have to give you my second solution, but do not abandon this one too abruptly. You may agree with it later.
He turned back again to face the others.
There is another possible solution to the crime. This is how I arrived at it. When I heard the evidence, I leaned back and shut my eyes and began to think. Certain points presented themselves as worthy of attention. I enumerated these points to my 2 colleagues. Some I have already elucidated, such as a grease spot on a passport and so on. I will run over the points that remain. The first and most important is a remark made to me by Monsieur Bouc in the restaurant car at lunch on the first day after leaving Istanbul, to the effect that the company assembled was interesting because it was so varied, representing as it did all classes and nationalities. I agreed with him. But when this particular point came to mind, I tried to imagine whether such an assembly was ever likely to be collected under any other conditions. And the answer I made to myself was only in America. In America, there may be a household composed of such varied nationalities, an Italian chauffeur, an English governess, a Swedish nurse, a German lady's maid, and so on. That led me to my scheme of guessing. That is, casting each person for a certain part in the Armstrong drama, much as the producer casts a play. Well, that gave me an extremely interesting and satisfactory result. It helps to examine in my own mind each separate person's evidence, with some curious results. Take first the evidence of Mr. McQueen. My first interview with him was entirely satisfactory, but in my second he made a rather curious remark. I had described to him the finding of a note mentioning the Armstrong case, and he said, "But surely," and then paused and went on. I mean, that was rather careless of the old man. Now, I could feel that that was not what he had started to say. Supposing what he had meant to say was, "But surely that was burned," in which case, McQueen knew of the note and of its destruction. In other words, he was either the murderer or an accomplice of the murderer. Very good. Then the valet. He said his master was in the habit of taking a sleeping drug when traveling by train. That might be true, but would Rached have taken one last night? The automatic under his pillow gave light to that state. Rached intended to be on the alert last night. Oh, will we lose?
Nope, the thread is unraveling. I'm losing my mind.
Sorry. Rached intended to be on the alert last night. Whatever narcotic was administered to him must have been given without his knowledge. By whom? Obviously by McQueen or the valet. Now we come to the evidence of Mr. Hardman. I believe all that he told me about his own identity, but when it came to the actual methods he had employed to guard Mr. Rached, his story was neither more nor less than absurd. The only way to have protected Rached effectively was to pass the night actually in his compartment or in some spot where he could watch the door. The only thing that his evidence did show, plainly, was that no one in any other part of the train could have possibly murdered Rached. He drew a clear circle around the Istanbul carriage. That seemed to me rather curious and inexplicable fact, and I put it aside to tinkle. You probably all know by now the few words I overheard between Miss Debenham and Colonel Arbuthnot. The interesting thing to my mind was the fact that Colonel Arbuthnot called her Mary, and was clearly on terms of intimacy with her. But the colonel was supposed to have met her only a few days previously, and I know Englishmen of the colonel's type. Even had he fallen in love with the young lady at first sight, he would advance slowly and with decorum, not rushing things. Therefore, I conclude that Colonel Arbuthnot and Miss Debenham were in reality well acquainted and were for some reason pretending to be strangers. Another small point was that Miss Debenham's easy familiarity with the term long distance for a telephone call, yet Miss Debenham had told me that she had never been in the States. To pass another witness, Mrs. Hubbard had told us that lying in bed she had been unable to see whether the communicating door was bolted or not, so she had asked Miss Ohlsson to see for it. Now, through her statement, though her statement would have been perfectly true if she had been occupying compartment number 2, 4, 12, or any even number in which the bolt is directly on the handle of the door. In the uneven numbers, such as compartment number 3, the bolt is well above the handle and could not therefore be masked by the sponge bag in the least. I was forced to the conclusion that Mrs. Hubbard was inventing an incident that had never occurred.
You fucking bitch, dude.
And here let me say just a word or two about that. To my mind, the really interesting point about the dented watch is the place where it was found. In Ratchet's pajama pocket, a singularly uncomfortable and unlikely place to keep one's watch, especially as there is a watch hook provided just by the head of the bed. I felt sure, therefore, that the watch had been deliberately placed in the pocket. Fate. The crime, then, was not committed at 1:15. Was it then committed earlier? To be exact, at 23 minutes to 1? My friend Monsieur Bouc advanced as an argument in favor of the loud cry which awoke me from sleep. But if Ratchet had been heavily drugged, he could not have cried out. If he had been capable of crying out, he would have been capable of making some struggle to defend himself, and there were no signs of any such struggle. I remember that McQueen had called attention, not once but twice, the second time in a very blatant manner, to the fact that Ratchet could speak no French. I came to the conclusion that the whole business at 23 minutes to 1 was a comedy played for my benefit. Anyone might see through the watch business, it is a common enough device in detective stories. They assumed that I should see through it, and that, pluming myself in my own cleverness, I would go on to assume that since Ratchet spoke no French, the voice I heard at 23 minutes to 1 could not have been his, and that Ratchet must have been already dead. But I am convinced that at 23 minutes to 1, Ratchet was still lying in his drugged sleep. Oh, but the device had succeeded. I have opened my door and looked out, and I have actually heard the French phrase used. If I am so unbelievably dense as to not realize the significance of that phrase, it must be brought to my attention. If necessary, McQueen can come right out in the open. He can say, "Excuse me, Mr. Poirot. That can't have been Mr. Ratchet speaking. He couldn't speak French." Now, what was the real time of the crime, and who killed him? In my opinion, and this is only an opinion, Ratchet was killed at some time very close upon 2 o'clock. The latest hour the doctor gives us as possible. As to who killed him,
He paused, looking at his audience. He could not complain of any lack of attention. Every eye was fixed upon him. In the stillness, you could have heard a pin drop. He went on slowly.
I was particularly struck by the extraordinary difficulty of proving a case against any one person on the train, and by the rather curious coincidence that in each case the testimony giving an alibi came from what I might describe as an unlikely person. Thus, Mr. McQueen and Colonel Arbuthnot provided alibis for each other, 2 persons between whom it seemed most unlikely that there could have been any prior acquaintanceship. The same thing happened with the English valet and the Italian, and the Swedish lady and the English girl. I said to myself, this is extraordinary. They cannot all be in it. And then, messieurs, I saw light. They were all in on it. For so many people connected with the Armstrong case to be traveling by the same train through coincidence was not only unlikely, it was impossible. It must be not chance but design. I remember the remark of Colonel Arbuthnot about trial by jury. A jury is composed of 12 people. There were 12 passengers. Ratchet was stopped 12 times. And the thing that had worried me all along, the extraordinary crowd traveling in the Istanbul-Calais coach at the slack time of year, this was explained. Ratchet had escaped justice in America. There was no question as to his guilt. I visualized a self-appointed jury of 12 people who had condemned him to death and who, by the exigencies of the case, had themselves been forced to be his executioners. And immediately, on that assumption, the whole case fell into beautiful, shining order. I saw it as a perfect mosaic. Each person playing his or her allotted part. It was so arranged that if suspicion should fall on any one person, the evidence of one or more of the others would clear the accused person and confuse the issue.
I think stream died.
Yeah, I'm troubleshooting right now. I do still have it recording, so we at least have
Okay.
record that we did this.
Do you want to just keep on?
Yep.
In confused issue. Hardman's evidence was necessary in case some outsider should be suspected of the crime and be unable to prove an alibi. The passengers of the Istanbul carriage were noted. Every minute detail of their evidence was worked out beforehand. The whole thing was a very cleverly planned jigsaw puzzle, so arranged that every fresh piece of knowledge that came to light made the solution of the whole more difficult. As my friend Monsieur Bouc remarked, the case seemed fantastically impossible. That was exactly the impression intended to be conveyed. Did this solution explain anything? Yes, it did. The nature of the wounds, each inflicted by a different person. The artificial threatening letters are artificial since they were unreal, written only to be produced as evidence. Doubtless there were real letters running rash of his fate, which McQueen destroyed, substituting them for this one. Then Mr. Hardman's story of being called by Rachet, a lie of course from beginning to end. The description of the mythical small dark man with a womanish voice, a convenient description since it had the merit of not incriminating any of the actual wagon conductors, as they would apply equally well to a man or woman. The idea of stabbing is at first sight a curious one, but on reflection nothing else would fit the circumstances so well. The dagger was a weapon that could be used by anyone, strong or weak, and it made no noise. I fancy, though I may be wrong, that each person in turn enters Ratchet's darkened compartment through that of Mrs. Hubbard and struck. They themselves would never know which blow actually killed them. The final letter which Ratchet had probably found on his pillow was carefully burned. With no clue pointing to the Ohlsson case, there would be absolutely no reason for suspecting any of the passengers on the train. It would be put down as an outside job, and the small dark man with a womanish voice would actually have been seen by one or more of the passengers leaving the train at Broad. I do not know exactly what happened when the conspirators discovered that this part of their plan was impossible owing to the accident to the train. There was, I imagined, a hasty consultation, and then they decided to go through with it. It was true that now one and all of the passengers were bound to come under suspicion, but that possibility had already been foreseen and provided for. The only additional thing to be done was to confuse the issue even further. Two so-called clues were dropped into the dead man's compartment, one incriminating Colonel Arbuthnot, who had the strongest alibi and whose connection with the Armstrong family was probably the hardest to prove. And the second clue, the handkerchief, incriminating Princess Dragomiroff, who, by virtue of her social position, had particularly frail physique, and the alibi given her by her maid and the conductor was practically an unassailable position. Further to confuse the issue, a red herring was thrown across the trail, the mythical woman in the red kimono. Again, I am to bear witness to this woman's existence. There is a heavy bang at my door. I get up and look out and see the scarlet kimono disappearing in the distance. A judicious selection of people, the conductor, Miss Debenham, McQueen, will also have seen her. It was, I think, someone with a sense of humor who thoughtfully placed the scarlet kimono on the surface of my suitcase while I was interviewing people in the dining car. Where the garment came from in the first place, I do not know. I suspect it is the property of Countess Sandrieni, since her luggage contained only a chiffon negligee, so elaborate as to be rather a tea gown than a dressing gown. When McQueen first learned that the letter which had been so carefully burned had in part escaped destruction and that the word Armstrong was exactly the word remaining, he must at once have communicated his news to the others. It was at this moment that the position of Countess Sandrieni became acute, and her husband immediately took steps to alter the passport. It was their second piece of bad luck. They one and all agreed to deny utterly any connection to the Armstrong family. They knew I had no immediate means of finding out the truth, and they did not believe that I should go into the matter unless my suspicions were aroused against one particular person. Now there was one further point to consider. Along that my theory of the crime was the correct one, and I believe that it must be the correct one, then obviously the vagabond conductor himself must be party to the plot, but if so, that gives 13 persons, not 12. Instead of the usual formula of so many people, one is guilty, I was faced with the problem that of 13 persons, one and only one was innocent. Which was that person? I came to a very odd conclusion. I came to the conclusion that the person who had taken no part of the crime was the person who would be considered the most likely to do so. I referred to Constantine. I was impressed by the earnestness of her husband when he swore to me solemnly on his honor that his wife had never left her compartment that night. I decided that Constantine took, so to speak, his wife's place. If so, then Pierre Michel was definitely one of the 12. But how could one explain his complicity? He was a decent man who had been many years in the employ of the company, not the kind of man who would be bribed to assist in a crime. Then Pierre Michel must be connected in the Armstrong case, but that seemed very improbable. Then I remembered that the dead nursery maid had been French. Supposing that the unfortunate girl had been Pierre Michel's daughter, that would explain everything. It would also explain the place chosen for the staging of the crime. Were there any others whose part in the drama was not clear? Colonel Arbuthnot, as I put down as a friend of the Armstrongs, they had probably been through the war together. The maid, Hildegard Schmidt, I guess her place in the Armstrong household. I could guess her place in the Armstrong household. I am perhaps over greedy, but I sense a good cook instinctively. I laid a trap for her. She fell into it. I said I knew she was a good cook. She answered, yes, indeed. All my ladies have said so. But if you're employed as a lady's maid, your employer seldom had a chance of learning whether or not you're a good cook. Then there was Hardman. He seemed quite definitely not to belong to the Armstrong household. I could only imagine that he had been in love with the French girl. I spoke to him of the charm of foreign women, and again I obtained the reaction I was looking for. Sudden tears came to his eyes, which he pretended were dazzled by the snow. There remains Mrs. Hubbard. Now, Mrs. Hubbard, let me say, played the most important part in the drama. By occupying the compartment communicating with that of Rachel, she was more open to suspicion than anyone else. In the nature of things, she could not have an alibi to fall back upon. To play the part she played, the perfectly natural, slightly ridiculous American fond mother, an artist was needed. But there was an artist connected with the Armstrong case. Mrs. Armstrong's mother, Linda Arden, the actress.
Ain't no way. Ain't no way. He stopped. Then, in a soft, rich, dreamy voice, quite unlike the one she had used all the journey, Mrs. Hubbard said,
This is why I asked you to play her.
I always fancied myself in comedy parts. She went on still dreamily. That slip about the sponge bag was silly. It shows you should always rehearse properly. We tried it on the way out. I was in an even number compartment then, I suppose. Never thought of the bolts being in different places. She shifted her position a little and looked straight at Poirot. You know all about it, Monsieur Poirot. You're a very wonderful man. But even you can't quite imagine what it was like, that awful day in New York. I was just crazy with grief. So were the servants, and Colonel Arbuthnot was there too. He was John Armstrong's best friend.
You saved my life in the war,
said Arbuthnot. We decided then and there. Perhaps we were mad. I don't know. That the sentence of death that Cassetti had escaped had got to be carried out. There were 12 of us, or rather 11. Suzanne's father was over in France, of course. First we thought we'd draw lots as to who should do it, but in the end we decided on this way. It was the chauffeur, Antonio, who suggested it. Mary worked out all the details later with Hector McQueen. He'd always adored Sonia, my daughter, and it was he who explained to us exactly how Cassetti's money had managed to get him off. It took a long time to perfect our plan. We had first to track Ratchet down. Hardman managed that in the end. Then we had to try to get Masterman and Hector into his employment, or at any rate, one of them. Well, we managed that. Then we had a consultation with Suzanne's father. Colonel Arbuthnot was very keen on having 12 of us. He seemed to think it made it more in order. He didn't like the stabbing idea much, but he agreed that it did solve most of our difficulties. While Suzanne's father was willing, Suzanne was his only child. We knew from Hector that Ratchet would be coming back from the east sooner or later by the Orient Express. With Pierre and Michel actually working on that train, the chance was too good to be missed. Besides, it would be a good way of not incriminating any outsiders. My daughter's husband had to know, of course, and he insisted on coming on the train with her. Hector wangled it, so that Ratchet selected the right day for traveling when Michel would be on duty. We meant to engage every carriage in the Stamboul-Calais coach, but unfortunately there was one carriage we couldn't get. It was reserved long beforehand for a director of the company. Mr. Harris, of course, was a myth. But it would have been awkward to have any stranger in Hector's compartment, and then at the last minute you came. She stopped. Well, she said, you know everything now, Monsieur Poirot. What are you going to do about it? If it must all come out, can't you lay the blame upon me and me only? I would have stabbed that man 12 times willingly. It wasn't only that he was responsible for my daughter's death and her child's, and that of the other child who might have been alive and happy now. It was more than that. There had been other children before Daisy. There might be others in the future. Society had condemned him. We were only carrying out the sentence. But it's unnecessary to bring all these others into it. All these good, faithful souls, and poor Michel and Mary and Colonel Arbuthnot, they love each other. Her voice was wonderful, echoing through the crowded space, that deep, emotional, heart-stirring voice that had thrilled many a New York audience. Poirot looked at his friend.
You are director of the company, Monsieur Bouc?
He said.
What do you say?
Monsieur Bouc cleared his throat.
In my opinion, Monsieur Poirot,
He said.
The first theory you put forward was the correct one. Decidedly so. I suggest that that is the solution we offer to the Yugoslavian police when they arrive. You agree, Doctor?
Certainly I agree.
Said Dr. Constantine.
As regards the medical evidence, I think that I made one or two fantastic suggestions.
Then,
Said Poirot.
having placed my solution before you, I have the honor to retire from the case.
What the fuck? Nicely done, ladies and gents. Nicely done. We read the whole book. The whole book, we read it.
Let's go. Let's fucking go.
Let's go.
That was fun.
Yeah.
That was a delight. What a fucking... Okay. Firstly, thank you again, all of you, for joining and dealing with the schedule changes and the minor hiccups and suddenly my stream borking out, I guess.
My internet fucking dying.
Yes, like, it's totally fine. You know, this was meant to be a fun, lighthearted thing, and I think we accomplished that. I truly do.
Yeah.
My heart
That's
is
fun.
racing
Yes.
right now. Fucking...
Yeah, so sorry for the late.
That's okay. That's okay.
But
We
you were on
managed to
it.
go through. Yeah, we're all here. We all made it happen. Everyone did so well. Fucking Corteth.
What?
I like how that it says the one thing and you're like, what? But I have to continue reading. God dang it!
What the fuck? Yeah, and there were so many. It was such a surreal experience. We actually got through this a lot faster than I thought, so I can at least manage like a 5-minute after party here. So,
That's fucking dope.
Juggling, it was such a surreal experience. Like, just reading the fucking book as we're going. B, troubleshooting stream issues. C, trying to keep an eye on everyone's connectivity. D, making sure that everything else is like working okay. But I cannot believe that it was fucking Martha. Well, it was all of them.
Yeah.
They just said fuck that guy in particular.
I mean,
Martha.
fucking Martha. And it's like, I really do feel like this book, like I already gaslight myself, right? Like I'm already thinking, like there's a reason that my D&D group like draws my character with like the red thread, like connecting news articles and like pictures and like insane theories, because I felt like I was doing just that, but then I was like, no, that's too much. But then it was just enough. It was exactly what it was. It was exactly what it was.
Yeah, I mean,
My
you called it out.
paranoia paid off. Yeah, my paranoia paid off.
Well, I mean, I was really impressed with the fact that you actually picked up on
That's the
Colonel
thing that,
Arbuthnot
like,
mentioning like trial by 12.
Yeah.
You know, wait, there are 12 passengers.
And I think that part in particular is what made my Kokoro begin to go doki doki, because I was like, wait, no, I remember talking about that. And then Poirot was like, yeah, or Hubbard / Arden was like, oh yeah, he wanted to do 12 because he thought that was all in order, but he didn't like the stabbing.
Yeah.
No fucking way. No fucking way. Insane.
Yeah.
He actually wanted 12 shotgun blasts to the chest, but that would have been too hard to cover up.
That's too much, he said. Too much.
That's
Then we
just
had-
a pile of goo.
There would be nothing left. And you know what? They should have done it that way, because then Poirot would have been like, who spilled strawberry preserves in this car? I don't understand.
And then Poirot being a master ventriloquist, like 4 different voices.
Yeah, dude, he is a man of mystery. He's a man of many talents.
Oh, they're 4 different people.
Yeah, we would
Yeah.
just kind of like hop in where we needed, which is exactly how it should. It's an exercise in improv, right?
Yeah.
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 No, you guys did great. Loved the voices you gave everyone. It was really nice. Nice little
interesting.
cherry on top.
And then the French that I had is Bouc. I actually, because that line that one I didn't know how to pronounce, it wasn't highlighted, so it caught me off guard.
I'm so
The rest of them
sorry.
I looked up. Like I actually looked up pronunciation for them, so that was at least close to correct.
Yeah, there was. If I had the French guy, I would not have done very well because I would have been like, oui, baguette.
Well, and
I was trying not to go too stereotypical.
no, it was good.
Accent
It
there.
sounded very good French.
Yes. And the fact that I couldn't go through and double check highlighting stuff, I was working myself up into a froth like the whole week. Shout out to my homeboy who was like, yeah, I can do that for you. But I'm also like a control freak, and I want to make sure that everything is to snuff, but we got through. I think it went great.
It was really fun
Yes.
to see,
Yeah.
to
I
hear
heard it.
your reaction to,
Oh my
yeah,
God.
but there was an artist, the
Are you
actress,
fucking-
Linda Arden.
Yeah.
Bitch.
Love that reveal.
I had to actually get up and like step away for like a couple of seconds as it was beginning to unfold, because I was
And the
like,
thing-
I just can't believe that some of the insanity that I was like, oh, maybe this could happen, or I don't know, maybe this, yeah, actually, yes.
I
You
think
actually-
that's.
I can
think
tell you
that's the
detected it
longest
too.
one.
As we were going along. Because like I would have described, and it was when I remember, it's one of the few things I remember from the first time I ever listened to the story, was I did feel like Mrs. Hubbard was like over the top, like something seemed just kind of ridiculous, and even realizing that she's written intentionally that way. Now we know, and and then on rereading it, I realized that the word I would use to describe her is theatrical.
Yeah, and like that's what I came
and
to.
You started to pick up on that too. Yeah.
Because initially when it started, I know I was like, you know, we all know a Mrs. Hubbard, right? We all know like an over-the-top, old biddy, busybody in everyone else's business. But then as it went on and on and on, she just kind of escalated to the point of absurdity, and I think that was the point where I was like, you're hamming it up a little bit. And I don't know what...
Imaginary Incorporated just raided with 1 viewers.
Imaginary, thank you for the raid. Welcome. We're just winding down, but I appreciate you nonetheless. God bless. But yeah, I mean, there came that point where we had reached a fever pitch of silly biddiness that had me on high alert.
Yeah.
No, it was really good. I'm really glad that this was the first Agatha Christie book that I actually read. I need to stop saying Agatha Christie because now I'm saying it unironically. I'm really sorry, Agatha. I'm sorry.
Isn't she dead? Like,
I think so.
or is she still alive?
Yes.
No, you don't need to apologize.
No, she's dead.
She's gonna come kill me with 12 people if I keep calling her Agatha Christie.
Well, she's a crispy lady.
Well, I mean, now she's like sludge.
Crunchy. Yeah, crunchy.
Agatha Crunchy.
The same sludge he'll be with 12 shotgun blasts to the chest.
I can't wait to be raspberry jam. No, really good. That was a blast. I almost want to do this more often, but we'll work that out as time goes on. Again, thank all of you for doing this and dealing with this and just rolling with it. There was a weird Twitch issue where suddenly the server that I usually use just got wiped off the face of the planet, maybe also with 12 shotgun blasts, I'm not sure. But the VOD in its entirety I will upload to YouTube, and then I will give it to you guys if you want to distribute it to, you know, your viewers or your friends, or, you know, maybe your mother or guardian can print out a QR code to it and put it on the fridge, whatever. Whatever you want to do with it.
Read.
Yeah,
I'll
look
put it
what
on my
I
fridge
did.
next to those Strix quotes.
Yeah, and then like, you know, you can put it on your resume, you know, like I participated.
I'm a voice actor.
Yes, VA extraordinaire. Here is the proof. Please enjoy it. And they'll be like, you're hired. So I'll get that out.
Hired.
Yes, I'll get that out probably tomorrow, and then we can go from there. I need to jet. I have a bus to catch.
See you later.
Thank you again so much. I had easily one of my favorite streaming experiences thanks to you guys, so can't thank you enough.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Go,
having
white
me.
girl, go catch that bus.
Oh my god, I'm gonna try
Goodbye,
my best.
Strix.
Farewell. Enjoy
Have
your
fun.
evening. Farewell.
Bye.
Farewell.
Bye.
Thank you. Farewell.
Bye-bye.